Blog Talk Radio.
Are you ready? The champ is here! It's just a man! Give me a hell yeah! What the rock is cooking? To be the man, you have to be the man! Big bubble pump! If you hook up! Falling! Holler! At the end! Woo, woo, woo! Cup of coffee in the big day.
It's Wednesday. You know what that means. Working the Marks coming to you live here via Famcast Media. I am New Jersey's premier award-winning journalist, Fernando Uribe, and he is New Jersey's premier wrestling analyst, the PBR superstar, Patrick Vincent Rivera, here on Working the Marks.
Still giving my government name out there, bro. Why you putting my government name out there? I'd also have you know that I've been voted the top 5 most handsome vocalist by the Latino Spirit Online magazine in the state of New Jersey as well, okay? Look that up, all right? Oh, it's out there, okay? It's out there.
I will.
All right?
Folks, sharing is caring. Make sure you...
Except for STDs.
Of course. And make sure you do share it, and certainly on all of your social media platforms, folks. Tell everybody you know that how much you love Working the Marks here via Famcast Media. Shout out to our amazing executive producer, Dee Rotten, who produces all of our great content, our reels, and all the great stuff you see on social media every week via Working the Marks. PVR, what's going on, bro? How are you?
Nothing. You should have seen what happened in the gorilla position before we went on the air. It was crazy what happened in the gorilla position. All right?
Yeah,
not as crazy as some of the things that go on at All In, but pretty darn crazy. Timothy Brown, my man. Timothy Brown, fan of the show. How you doing?
Guys get contentious and they start chirping, I guess, right? In gorilla, right? It seems to be happening, right? All the time. But folks, again, we appreciate you joining us here.
Right? There's no real glass behind me. Is there any real glass behind you?
No, not at all. No.
Nobody's gonna cry a river for anybody here about any real glass.
Yeah, I hope not. I mean, if there is, that's a problem. But folks, this the 30th of August. We appreciate you tuning in here as summer's coming to a close and September's right around the corner. My favorite time of the year, fall, leaves changing, Halloween, all that good stuff we love in the autumn season. But a lot going on in the world of professional wrestling, Pat, and certainly this past Sunday, a record-breaking, allegedly, All In.
Record-breaking.
Yes, emanating from the newer revised Wembley Stadium in downtown London. Approximately, according to Tony Khan, 81,035 paid attendees at Wembley for All In. You know, obviously 5 years after the original All In a much smaller venue, a vision that Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, and everybody associated with what would become AEW had, and certainly I think for that audience, a great achievement. Obviously, we'll get to more on that later because there's still a lot of skepticism. But speaking of the skepticism, one of the leading podcasters in this industry, I would say in this genre, Pat, is Eric Bischoff, former WCW executive vice president, a guy who saw a lot of prosperity in the mid to late 90s because of pro wrestling. Certainly the only guy on record, let's be fair, that ever really gave Vince McMahon and the WWE any serious competition, any headaches, having to force Vince to look at his books often, call his accountants, stuff like that, because of how close the wrestling wars were in the 90s. So, you know, if anyone really has any credibility to talk about wrestling wars and competition, it's Eric Bischoff. And this week on his 83 Weeks podcast with Conrad Thompson, and let's be fair, you know, he's been one of the more critical voices of AEW since its inception, which is going actually now on 4 years, coming up this October. But really, I think what he was very clear about, and again, he wanted to make sure it wasn't just clickbait that he was talking about this week, because a lot of haters and Mark said, oh, Eric's just being a hater. No, what he was specific about was not wanting Tony Khan to repeat the same mistakes of other promoters. And certainly in the wake of All In at Wembley Stadium, he knocked some of the sort of decisions going into the pay-per-view as too sort of, quote, Indieriffic. I think that's a great word to describe what AEW has become.
Well, it's been that way for a very, very long time. Obviously, their niche audience, or really their core audience, is a niche audience. And, to me, I kind of have to agree with Bischoff. For as successful as All In was for AEW, for as notable as it was in their history, it just still had a very indie feel to it, and you and I have talked about it, since then. And the main event, I think, was really one of those matches that really kind of put that into perspective. That's a match that you look at, and no offense to the guys involved, they're talented guys, but that's not going to main event a WrestleMania. That's not going to main event a WWE PLE. That doesn't have a big time feel to it. In my opinion, I think Samoa Joe and CM Punk had more of a big time feel to it, because those are two big stars, and Punk is arguably the biggest star in the company. And that match to me should have been the main event instead of Cole versus MJF. Regardless of that, I think the presentation of the show was obviously not on par with WWE, did not have a big stadium show feel to it. And regardless of the people in attendance, it did still feel like an indie show, and it did feel quite Indieriffic, if you will.
Well, it's funny because and here's another quote from the interview with Conrad Thompson, where he says, quote, "People should have been able to learn from some of the mistakes I made in WCW, or I allowed to happen. Not only are you making the same mistakes that Eric Bischoff made and WCW made, but they're on steroids and they're actually worse."
Yeah.
Bischoff was vocal in his disappointment, as many others were too. Jim Cornett this week, as well as Conan and Disco Inferno, Wade Keller via the Pro Wrestling Torch, about the Stadium Stampede match. And let's be fair, it was hard to keep up with that match. For example, I mean, you had 10 guys kind of just plopped together like a bad recipe of, I don't know, souffle, right? Just sort of put together in less than 3 days right before the pay-per-view. And I mean, one thing is a street fight, let's say it's 2-on-2, like case in point, the match this Saturday at Payback, which we'll talk about later. But, the Steel City street fight upcoming between Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens against Finn Balor and Damian Priest. That's one. There's 4 guys. That's not a lot to agent or maneuver camera-wise where, okay, it's going to be hard to follow. It literally was almost impossible to follow. Yeah. It was comical, but it was also almost impossible to follow because you had 10 guys literally all over the building. And when I mean all over the building, I'm not talking about an arena. I'm talking about a huge stadium. And it made the match hard to follow. It made it a clusterfuck. It was a lot of unnecessary bleeding, gimmicky deathmatch garbage. Some of the stunts that they pulled, some of the spots, some of the bumps, and Bischoff was like, at least also intellectually honest, where he said, hey, the rest of the card, there's some things, all right, he had some good things to say about the main event, which, I wasn't too much a fan of, or the result. But again, with another pay-per-view in less than a week in Chicago, you would think that, hey, and also too, Bischoff mentioned that arguably the biggest star in that company is going to be unavailable in the Staples show for AEW in Chicago this weekend. Again, Tony Khan finds himself in a really bad position. And for all he can brag about the paid attendance, and this is the most successful gate in the history of pro wrestling before light was discovered, before fire, before anything. It just seems like, Khan's putting himself, it's like one step forward and literally 7 steps back. And that's not good for a company that he went on and said, hey, wrestling's been missing something for 21 years, sort of not a dig, but sort of a reminder about WCW going under. And now it's like fans have legitimate competition to look at. That's a bad wording by Tony Khan.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he also referred to them as competition when anybody with their head screwed on straight would know that they're not competition. They're not in WWE's league whatsoever. Getting back to the Stadium Stampede match real quick, it was very difficult to follow. It wasn't produced very well. And I think you can, like you're bringing up that tag team title match between, Sammy and Kevin against the Judgment Day against Finn and Priest. Those 4 guys are pros, dude. They know what they're doing. They're veterans. They've been in the business a long time. More importantly, they're used to working on TV. They're used to working with top-tier production for a very, very long time. there's not a whole hell of a lot of agenting that needs to be done for that match, because all four of those guys know what they need to do, when to do it, and how to do it. More importantly, they know where the camera is at all times. Parts of the match, you'd find these guys bumping into the cameraman, getting in the way of the cameraman. Even the one ladder spot involving Santana and Penta, the ladder broke, when he was trying to power bomb him through the table. I think it was just way too much going on for anybody to really get invested. I think for people that like the carnage, that like the blood, that like the car crashes, that was a good match for them, I guess. But I think if you're looking at it objectively, and if you're trying to present it so that it could be palatable to a bigger audience, it's not very digestible, man. It's not. But Tony Khan, he continues to make a lot of big claims. He's talking about bringing All In back, next year for the bank holiday.
It's official. Yeah, it's official.
Yeah, it's official. He has a confirmed date and everything. He's coming back again for the bank holiday over there in England. But Jim Cornette brought up something really, really interesting. He said, Tony, I don't think is thinking about the law of diminishing returns, because you look at Grand Slam, the first time he went there, right? They said it was 20,000, right? Then after that, they went back and it was like 13,000. Now, as it stands, it's advertised for single digit thousands. You know what I mean? That's showing you.
In fairness, Pat, in fairness, again, I'm not one to defend Tony Khan,
sure.
But in fairness, in 2021, that main event of Omega and Danielson, 30 minutes. Sure. I mean, I think that sold the ability to at least maybe sell out that building per se. I'm not defending it, but at least that was more digestible. In 2022, It was pretty much after the aftermath of All Out and what was going to happen with MJF, the tournament, and all that. It wasn't as compelling as Omega and Danielson. I mean, that's just the truth. I'm sorry.
I'll agree with you on that. More importantly, I think it's the first time. The first time is always the best. And, again, I think when it was announced, everybody's like, what? Arthur Ashe, which right now, you got the U.S. Open going on over there, which I've been keeping an eye on as an avid tennis fan that I am. And I'm rooting for my guy, Carlos Alcaraz, to take it all again. The youngest number one ranked tennis player. All right. What, are you tired, or you trying to hit a GTS on somebody? What's going on over there?
No, I'm just hearing about tennis puts me to sleep, but go on.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's the sport of champions. It's a sport it's a tough guy sport, a real tough guy sport.
I'll take golf.
Golf? Boring. Yeah. Boring. That's bro, come on, man. I mean, you could be 175 and still play fucking golf. You can't be that old to play tennis.
Not if you dive a heat stroke walking 18 holes. No,
they got cars for that. They're lazy. Those guys don't even walk.
You're still going to get heat stroke if you're outside with a polo.
No. Come on. You get a guy to sit down. You get him one of those fans with the spray water things. They sit on a MyPillow. They can fart into it and all that stuff. You have them drive around. Tennis, you're out there for 4 hours going back and forth. It's a real man's fucking sport. But anyways, that being said, when they originally went to Arthur Ashe Stadium, that was a novelty, man, because nobody thought that you could have a fucking wrestling show at that stadium. That was pretty interesting. So that, I think, coupled with Kenny Omega and Bryan Danielson, really piqued people's interest and made people want to go and see what this was about. Now, granted, you were going to sit there for about 7.5 hours, and you probably get home fucking whenever, but the interest in those shows and the interest in those novelty shows, without the big storylines, without the emotional investment, it's not going to be sustainable in the long run. WWE can do that because they have a lot of emotional investment. You compare Payback, which we're going to talk about a little bit here, and you compare All In. All In had a lot of really cold matches. There was very, very few. There was maybe 2 hot matches that I could think of that they had been building for a little bit. MJF and Cole, they had been building it for a little bit. I wasn't particularly into it. I was not a fan of a lot of the vignettes, but you know what? That's what they wanted to do. That's how they wanted to promote it. They built it. They hyped it up. The women's 4-way, same thing. They had hyped that up. They had built that up. Those were the only 2 hot matches going into it, where you look at Payback, and Payback, it's like, come on, man. All the matches are hot. So it's pretty. What is going on there? What was that, D? What's up, bud? Pretty soon.
Propaganda, bro. Propaganda.
No, I'm okay. No, I'm not giving my debit card number. Oh, Fernando, you got a challenge. Timothy Brown will play in a game of golf. Ha ha.
Oh,
my man.
Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown. All right, 18 holes. Gotta hit me up.
It's not the first time you've dealt with 18 holes. But anyways, Brian Howard was president backstage at the end of the recording, ran into none other than CM Punk, Jeff Hardy, who needed the bathroom, which is Chicagoan. I want to fix something. Jeff was pretty busy.
Oh God.
All right. Anyways,
that's a long ass.
what's up with these chain letters? But anyways, yeah. So again, I mean, it's I just don't see it being as successful the second go around. Now, we could be wrong. I think a lot of us were wrong about the attendance or the alleged attendance. Obviously, as the event went on, you did see the crowd start to decrease over time.
Pat, listen, I'll concede the point. I mean, I was wrong.
Hold on. What time is it? 7:35, August 30th, 2023. All right, D, timestamp that. Fernando admitted he was wrong about something.
Holy shit.
Go ahead.
Unbelievable. Listen, for weeks, I have been saying that I did not think, again, without a card being announced for months, really, you really only started seeing the card taking shape really at the beginning of August, arguably. I was really skeptical that they could fill that building, despite, again, we talked about it over the summer, the variables about it's a Sunday in England, Premier League matches, fans going to football games, certainly the holiday. Again, all those variables, I said, it's going to be hard, I think, to get that stadium at full capacity. And I said, while they're hungry for pro wrestling in Europe, in Western Europe, specifically in England, I said, this might be a stretch. I said, 50-ish. They might have to do something with the camera to not make it look as empty as it might look. And boy, was I wrong, because they made it a point right from 0 hour at noon Eastern time here in the United States when Cole, I'm actually not Cole and MJF, I think it was another match before that, where they made it a point to have those drones all over the building, all from an aerial view, capture that building and capture the attendance.
Yeah.
And again, I was surprised. I was like, wow. I don't think it's, 81 now kind of saying that with people in attendance and medics and witch doctors and masseuse and
bookies,
fire trucks and hookers, whoever, there was like 90,000 people.
I think Larry the dog was there too as well. Larry the dog, I think, counts as one.
Maybe he had a litter of dog, who knows? But the building, for the most part, at the beginning, looked pretty full. I'm not going to say, maxed out, but I was like, wow, This is a pleasant surprise. And I think that also, too, they were smart to show all those aerial views.
Not during the pre-show.
Well, true. But as we got closer to bell time at 1 o'clock Eastern, you saw that they were making a point to, during the panel, the overhead. I mean, that's great. And again, I'll applaud them.
Yeah.
It's a great accomplishment. Something we, again, as critics and as cynics, we can never take away from them. But to your point about diminished return, to return a year later, and Khan's going to keep making the same mistakes. He's not going to be promoting this correctly. He's not going to be having enough vignettes, enough character development, storyline development. He might just be rushing a card in the last 4 or 5 weeks again. And I don't know, again, if the WWE decides to go to England at any point between now and next August,
it's on.
That's also going to present problems for AEW, because we know they're going to sell out that building. We know they're going to sell out that building.
They'll sell seats out in the parking lot.
I just think that, again, it's a great accomplishment. I was wrong. I said 50-ish, maybe 60 the max.
Yeah.
What was I wrong? I mean,
but you could sell out a building if you're giving away free tickets, bro. The WCW did it.
Fair. But it looked like 70 and change to me. Now, 81 plus, again, plus the masseuse, plus the medics, plus the guidance counselors, and the candy stripers. I don't know, maybe 90, but it's
the entire roster of Fulham Football Club, the Jacksonville Jaguars,
Parliament, maybe Parliament was there.
Parliament Funkadelic, everybody.
I bet you they all got a ride to the stadium.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, look, I think personally it was what you said, like 60, maybe 70, in that neighborhood. And I think the rest of it were like giveaways. And you could kind of tell, man, as the show went on, that the crowd started to leave, because by the end of once it started getting darker, you started seeing that whole upper bowl was completely empty. and it was basically the first part of the bowl, and it was the boxes, and then it was the ground, and that was it.
They came
That's
to
all
see
you really
CM
saw.
Punk and Samoa Joe. That was it.
Well, I mean, but again, I think that kind of further fuels the point that I was making about Punk being in the main event, which that's what it should have been. It should have been Punk in the main event.
Pat, when you're mentioning the holiday weekend, right, the bank holiday, is that Monday?
I'm not sure because you see, these teeth are pretty good, so I'm not English. So I would have to honestly check it out and see.
The only reason is because if it wasn't a holiday and people have to go to work on Monday, you know, if I'm just sort of hypothesizing here, but if it wasn't that, if Monday's not the exact holiday and people are just leaving because they have to go to work, I mean, who knows? Maybe that's one variable. But if Monday is the holiday and they're leaving, yeah, it's even more of an indictment because people were, like you said, losing interest in the card.
Okay, so I'm looking for English bank holidays here. Let's see. How many bank holidays are July, December? I'm assuming that that it's like their version of Labor Day, I guess you would say. Yeah, the 28th of August is a bank holiday. And the show, so people had off. You know what I'm saying? But not everybody has off. Not everybody has off. Yeah.
True. Yes, that's right.
You know, I mean, a lot of people want to buy their fish and chips too. You know, not a lot of people, or maybe they work at Nando's.
Go see their dentist on the day off from work.
Yeah, something to that effect. So, you know, I think that, you know, people went there to see what they wanted to see. And look, for me, I don't know about you, but I've been given tickets, you know, to free events, right? I'm sure you have too. I've gone to plenty of free events. Once I see what I want to see from the show, I'm out. I'm not going to fucking stick around for the rest of the show and watch something I don't want to see. I'm going to beat the traffic and I'm going to get out of there early. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, you struggle finding parking. So it's a little bit difficult for you, you know, when you go to these types of events. But, you know, I think that a lot of the people that left saw what they wanted to see, right? They saw CM Punk.
But Pat, remember, you still had Ospreay and Jericho, which was pretty late in the night.
Yeah. I mean, but there's even pictures of when the FTR took on the Young Bucks. Ooh. And the crowd was still kind of shrinking then. You know what I'm saying? Like the lower bowl was starting to empty unless everybody made their way down. But even then, it still didn't really look like that. And you couldn't even tell because AEW, for whatever reason, unlike WWE, doesn't shine light on the crowd. You know what I'm saying?
Want to get shot.
Yeah. WWE makes it a point to show the crowd. Even when it's dark, they make a point to just shine light on everything to be like, hey, check this out. This is the attendance. So, I mean, look, people are going to speculate till the cows come home. At the end of the day, Tony Khan was able to pretty much fill up most of a stadium in England by hook or crook. And you got to tip your cap to the guy. And you got to tip your cap to the talent for going out there and working.
No, listen, overall, a card that I was entertained with. Again, I was so delighted and surprised, like a lot of people were online, that the Living Legends retained the coveted AEW World Tag Team titles on Sunday, which every mark online thought, hey, the Bucks are going to play politics. They're not going to do business where the smart business move for them AEW wise would be let FTR win. But it was a surprise. I think every prognosticator out there was like, they were convinced that, hey, the Buckaroos were going to politic their way into a win. And that was probably the surprise of the night, to be fair, though, Pat. I know you're not a fan of FTR, but for us FTR fans, that was a surprise because especially after, you know, Cash Wheeler allegedly pulled a firearm on a motorist, you know, allegedly, again, you know, due process, right? We thought, hey,
kid.
Is he a thug? Would you consider him a thug? Would you call him a thug for flashing a gun?
Well, I would say Daniel Wheeler has his day in court coming up. There is due process. We'll let the process play itself out. That's it.
He's a road rager.
That's all we can do in our criminal justice system.
He's a road warrior.
Road warrior, literally. Well, he's built like a road warrior compared to the Buckaroos, but again, I think
everybody is
true. But again, a card that took a few weeks to kind of mash together. I gave it a B only because of I was ecstatic about the result of FTR winning. I thought I thought the women's match was a lot better than expected, considering some of the limitations we saw. Nice to see Saraya. I think Saraya's mom took the best bump in the night, in my opinion, without question. Also, I think for as much, listen, and we shit on Chris Jericho because of what he is right now and his work rate or lack thereof, but that match was not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I thought, listen, Ospreay clearly, I think, will not be in All Out this Sunday, as he'll be out, I guess, for some time due to back surgery, having to carry Jericho throughout that entire match. But I think, in fairness, Jericho didn't completely shit the bed on that match. Again, there were some spots that he shouldn't be doing anymore, but by and large, a match that was watchable. I think the main event, a little too predictable. To your point, and we've talked about it, like, Tony is just so insistent on sending the fans happy. Never a bad moment. Never like, oh, the fans leave outraged or angry. Oh, I didn't like that booking. It just seems like Tony's so insistent on pleasing every mark. And it's almost like spoiling children and giving them an extra scoop of ice cream every time they ask for it. I think that's the best way to describe Tony Khan's booking.
Did you guys enjoy his entrance?
Who? Tony Khan had an entrance?
No, Chris Jericho.
It's fine for what it was. It wasn't a concert. Remember, it was supposed to be a performance. We were spared a 15-minute mini concert. That's fine.
You're asking the wrong guy, man. But I look. I think the tag match. Let's start with that one. The tag title match. Bucks don't play politics. They're Shawn Michaels fans. All right, FTR, the Bret Hart fans. They're gonna play politics. They're gonna say, we can't lose in London. It would be like taking FTR, the characters, which they don't really have, but it would be like taking FTR and blowing their brains out, So you knew that.
But Pat, the perception about politicking is from the perception that they're maybe about Matt and Nick Jackson, that they don't behave correctly backstage. Or
how don't they behave correctly backstage? Why? Because they talk to Dave Meltzer and they blow fucking butterflies in his ears about bullshit that's going on because they don't like CM Punk.
About behavior that got them in trouble last year. Right.
Well, so they got into a scrap with CM Punk because they were talking shit on CM Punk. I don't see what that has to do with FTR. I mean, FTR, like, first of all, I think you're going based on that interview that they had with Jim Cornette, which they did in character, by the way.
Oh,
that interview that they did was all in character when they were talking about, oh, we're gonna hurt the Bucks and all this stuff. They didn't end up hurting the Bucks, bro. Those guys are professionals. All four of those guys are professionals. They know what they were doing. The match itself, I didn't think was all that great. I think it was not as fluid as it could have been. I think perhaps there might have been some miscommunication.
Or the other two matches.
Well, the other two matches were better, but I'm talking about the stadium match, the stadium tag title match between them. I don't think that match was really all that good. It was like at one point, FTR Guns, he missed his cue where he had to jump in and save FTR bald, and Nick Jackson pulled up his shoulder, bro, because dude like missed his mark, I understand that working in a stadium is difficult. It's been a while for them since they worked in a stadium, but they got to work at a stadium at WrestleMania, so that was pretty cool right here in MetLife Stadium. Ooh. The Young Bucks have never really worked in a big stadium like that. They've worked at the Tokyo Dome. That's a whole different thing, because Tokyo Dome, you're talking about 40,000 people as opposed to the alleged 81,000. So it's a whole different thing. But
hasn't the Tokyo Dome produce a little bigger than 40,000?
No, but you gotta understand, like, Wrestle Kingdom, and because of Tokyo's requirements and for Japan's requirements too, for like health, safety, fire, all that stuff. Word. They don't want to jam that many people inside of the stadium, so they generally get maybe 40 to 45,000 in the Tokyo Dome. We're not talking about 90,000 or anything like that. That's a baseball stadium. The difference between Wembley and Tokyo Dome is that Wembley is a football ground. Like a proper football ground, it's the national stadium for the English national team, who never bought it home. They've been trying to bring it home for a while, but that's a whole other conversation. But the match itself was not great. It was a little botchy, a little whatever. I had a feeling that the FTR was going to win because they're going to keep the FTR going as the tag champions until they can come up with something better. Plus, legacy, all that stuff, they got to make them seem a lot more important than what they are because everybody knows they're not really that important. So, I get it. I understand. They're living in the shadow of the Usos. That's hard. That's got to be really, really hard to be living in the shadow of the Usos.
That's fine.
And in the shadow of Sammy and Kevin, and in the shadow of Finn and in the shadow of Finn and Priest, and in the shadow of the Alpha Academy, and in the shadow of the Briscoe. I mean, we could keep going about people's shadows that they're living in, but you know, when you got to go out there and call yourselves living legends, you know, and you're not Larry Zbyszko, it's a fucking different story. At least Larry Zbyszko sold out a stadium back in the day.
7-star FTR. 7-star FTR. You know,
Whatever. Why don't they call their finisher the 7-star FTR? I don't even know what an FTR is. Okay, I look like the fucking third member of FTR Bob. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Right now, with my shaved head, and I'm FTR Bob, and I care about my family. I care about my children. You know.
You kind of do with that Bobby Fish mustache. Yeah, no doubt.
No, it's not happening yet. This is I got the Johnny Depp Pedro Pascal thing going on right now. You know, then it'll evolve into the Bobby Fish mustache. Or as he's more affectionately known in the Hispanic community, Roberto Pescado.
I thought that was the Coppinger.
The who?
The
Never heard of him. So, you know, like I was saying, that match itself was okay. The Jericho Ospreay match, you know, it was good for what it was. Ospreay obviously had to do a lot of the heavy lifting, you know, because he's a lot more athletic. Jericho, to me, I've been saying this for a while. I don't think he's capable of doing these kind of matches anymore. He's putting himself in a position, where he's going to really hurt himself in the long run if he hasn't already. And, you know, put him in tag matches, bro. I get it. You're paying the guy fucking $3 million a year. You got to put him out there, right? You got to put him in a big spot. It was a nice win for Will Ospreay because of the guy's name value, but I would have preferred to see Will Ospreay in there with somebody else. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't have minded seeing him and Kenny do it again and, you know, drop each other on their heads a million times. That would have been fine. That would have been okay because at least they're on par athletically. But, you know, that match itself was decent. The women's match I thought was okay. Saraya had a nice moment that she probably didn't get in WWE. She was very well protected in that match. In a lot of the spots, you could see that they were looking out for her. They were taking care of her, and understandably so. You know, she's a big name there. You know, she deserves her flowers for what she did for women's wrestling too. You know, but all in all, to me, man, I think just the card was really, really blah, very lackluster, and I would give it a C for CM Punk because I think he had the best match all night.
No, I'm with you. Listen, I think that the way we looked at this pay-per-view was interesting. Certainly 4 hours, obviously 5 if you include the pre-show. Not a surprise there for an AEW show.
That's a record for Tony Khan, right? Isn't that a short show for him?
I know, normally it's like 5-6 hours and plus, but certainly the card itself raised a lot of headlines. But arguably, it's what happened before All In went on the air that's creating even bigger headlines going into All Out in Chicago this week. And, you know, where do I begin here? Obviously, CM Punk arriving at Heathrow Airport after, let's be honest, a 5 and change flight. I know because I've done that flight. Arriving at Heathrow, apparently no car service, no one from the company there to receive him, to at least give him any indications of where to go for the hotel. It's been documented he was relying on either public transportation or the assistance of British citizens.
He was on a train. It's a fan took a picture with him.
Yeah, the tube. Yeah, during the morning. So I'm sure already after a 5 and change flight, getting to England, that happening, I think will put anybody in a bad mood as before you're going to work. And then not only that, but to compound the problem, right before he went out to face Samoa Joe, shortly before CM Punk's match, Jack Perry lost the coveted FTW championship back to Hook in a pretty sloppy match, if you ask me. But apparently some words were exchanged by Jack Perry and Phil Brooks backstage. Everyone seems to have, it's almost like the grassy knoll theory. It's like, well, there was this guy here and this guy overheard that, and Miro saw this, and Nick Jackson's wife made a t-shirt of that. It seems like everyone's got their own version of what happened.
Somebody knocked over Tony Khan's cocaine or something when that happened.
Exactly.
It was Adderall.
He was chopping it up with Adderall, like the little cutting board that you have in the kitchen there, little wooden cutting board. And he's like, fuck, now I don't know what my Adderall is. I don't know what my cocaine is. And it seems like a lot of drama before the show and subsequently drama after the show, which puts All Out this Sunday in Chicago, not in jeopardy, but to make it a very lame show without arguably the Second City hero being there to headline the card. I think it presents a lot of problems for Tony Khan.
Yeah, absolutely. And to backtrack a little bit, I'm going to add a little prequel section here that kind of led up to that. So Jack Perry had suggested to management that he wanted to do a glass spot because he knew he was going to have a limousine entrance at All In. So his idea was to either get suplexed or to suplex hook through the glass windshield on the car. Management had told him, we don't think that's a good idea. You should probably use sugar glass or you should do something else. They didn't really want to okay it. Talent relations didn't want to okay it. Tony Khan was kind of just like, well, I don't think it's a good idea, but you can do what you want. And I guess as a last ditch effort, they kind of tried to get CM Punk to intervene and to talk to him, being that he's one of the veterans in the locker room and one of the more respected guys.
What happened to that memo that went around about what's forbidden and what's not and what's authorized? What happened to that memo?
What was glass on there? Was glass on there or no? I don't know. I know.
What's the point though of circulating a memo to your company and telling, hey, certain things have to be approved or certain things are being discouraged? What the fuck is the point of printing paper?
Well, I think it falls under the category of things that are subject to approval. Obviously, you didn't see anything about glass on there, and you didn't see anything about backstage cocaine. So that kind of tells you everything you need to know right there. But Punk went up to him, tried to talk to him, tried to tell him it was a bad idea, and Jack Perry didn't want to hear it. So Jack Perry goes out there and makes a comment to the camera to the effect of, you see that right there? That's broken glass, Crimea River. So when he got backstage, he and Punk obviously made eye contact because Punk was standing in the gorilla position, waiting to go out for his next match, as a real pro, because obviously he's not going to go and hang out in his locker room so that they come and get him because he knows, he understands that he's next on the card. So he's going to be waiting there. Yeah, but, Hogan could do that. Drew House, but that's a whole other thing. But what ended up happening was they exchanged words, and what is being reported more than anything else was that Punk got him in a chokehold to neutralize him, and that Punk didn't want to do anything else to him, being that Punk is technically a trained fighter. So a little something that perhaps maybe police departments across the United States could learn, using a chokehold to neutralize somebody or using jujitsu to neutralize somebody instead of fucking putting a bullet in them. But again, that's another conversation for another time. So Punk did that, and then they broke it up, and then Punk was escorted to his locker room by security and was told that they think it's a good idea that he leave, which he did leave, went back to his hotel, and then ordered Nando's with his friends, and they all hung out until it was time for them to go back to the USA. So here's the thing. For me, as somebody who's wrestled before, who's been in the business before, who's been backstage, who's been chewed out by veterans, okay? I can name a tag match where my cousin and I had a tag match against Jay Lethal and Rainchild. We went out there and we did every fucking move we could think of. And when we got back, Pat Kenny and Ace Darling were waiting there and chewed us all out. And Rainchild got up and walked away because he didn't want to hear it. Jay Lethal, myself, and my cousin sat there and listened to what these guys had to say and took our browbeating because we deserved it. And the big emphasis was, you guys are risking yourselves too much. Work, get heat, work that crowd, get the emotions, get the emotional investment. You did 10 moves that could have been finishes already. Now, when we were breaking into the business, we were taught that you listen to the veterans, you take their advice, you respect them. And to me, it seems like maybe perhaps in AEW, that's not the issue. A lot of these guys tend to be West Coast guys. Maybe it's different how they do it in the West Coast. Bryan Danielson obviously is the, rule to the exception there. He's the guy that came over here to the East Coast. And more importantly,
Seattle, dude.
Well, he's Seattle. He's West Coast. Absolutely. But, he got trained by Shawn Michaels. He also ended up wrestling on the East Coast, So when he came over, he came to Jersey All Pro, he gave his respect to Homicide. He gave his respect to Loki. He gave his respect to the guys that were over here. Mike Quackenbush, Reckless Youth. Same thing with CM Punk. And that's why those guys were so well respected and received so well when they were over here, because they had respect for the veterans. So this is just wrestling tradition, man. And this is backstage stuff, and this is locker room etiquette, man. When a vet gives you advice, you listen to it. Even if you know what it is already, even if you think it's bullshit, you listen to it. And in this case, I got to say that CM Punk and management were doing the right thing by not letting Jack Perry go out there and potentially kill himself. But he still went out there and did it anyway. And what did it even matter? Nobody gives a rat's ass because everybody's talking more about the fight than the match.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it's interesting because it really just shines a light on the dysfunction and the, what I would argue is permeating in that company. No organization, no leadership by Tony Khan. And it's these incidents that are now being amplified, right, under a microscope to really, I think, illustrate the fact that this is a company, for Tony Khan to get during the media scrum to talk about like, well, this is, we're competition now. No, because a company like WWE would never allow this to happen. Are there skirmishes and chirping and barking at guys? And sure, that happens in any company, from the territory days to national syndication to whatever, WCW, NWA, WWE, ECW, whatever, that happens. But to the premise where now guys are taking liberties and management is not pulling talent aside and say, listen, we need to be more professional. This can't be going on, okay? Because what Jack Perry basically did, and whether he realizes or not, is he jeopardized the gate for the next 4 nights in the city of Chicago. Because all 4 dates are live shows. Tonight, Dynamite at the Now Arena. I believe Rampage is also live, not taped, at the Now Arena. Saturday's Collision at United Center is going to be live, and then All Out is live as well. I think it also really just, it puts the company in a really precarious position where now this card in 4 days is not very inspiring. And the fact that Tony Khan is subjecting people to paying another $50 in less than a week for another pay-per-view where this card is very lackluster and you're not going to have CM Punk on it in Chicago, I just think it reminds us all that, hey, when Triple H called it a secondary promotion and the AEW marks and the anti-WWE marks got all fickle, well, because that stuff doesn't happen in WWE, okay? If it does, we don't hear about it. It's nipped in the bud. It's that Band-Aid's put on that puncture wound quick. Here, it's like, well, it's done in front of everybody. You have Sean Ross Sapp reporting the time of day, what the temperature was Celsius there at the moment in London. You have Wade Keller reporting this. You have Alvarez and Meltzer changing underwear constantly every hour. I mean, it's a reflection of how dysfunctional that company is. And this latest example shows that CM Punk, you can tell he's just tired of being there. He's tired of, again, in his own words, dealing with children. And sooner or later, the chickens come home to roost, and sooner or later, that bill comes due. And I think that bill's coming due soon between Tony Khan and Phil Brooks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point, look, this isn't anything unusual to wrestling in the history of the business. You're dealing with a lot of guys that have egos, a lot of women that have egos, a lot of people that have egos, and you're putting them in a locker room and you're trying to make them get along. For the most part, a lot of them do. And I think they save all that ego shit and they save all that superstardom shit for when they go out through that curtain. But my big issue here is Jack Perry, in the grand scheme of things, is not on par with CM Punk. Jack Perry is just starting his career. Jack Perry is just getting his footing. He's not a household name. He's not. He's a decent young kid who I think has a long way to go with his career, but he's not on par with CM Punk, and he's not a top draw. And when you have a kid like this who jeopardizes your top draw being at 4 of your biggest shows coming up this week, it's a major, major problem. And I don't know if we did announce this though, but the 2 gentlemen have been suspended for this week and for the events that are coming up this week. Now, how long that suspension is, we don't know. And there was also some chatter about Punk confronting Tony Khan and, telling Tony Khan that he's tired of, what's going on there. And he also did mention to some of his friends that he, quote, hates this place. So we don't know what the situation could be. We don't know what's going to happen. I can tell you right now, as somebody who appreciates CM Punk, what he stands for, and what he's capable of, I think as a worker psychologically, his storytelling ability, he doesn't belong there. He needs to go back to WWE. He really, really does. And I think that, and I think he's craving that structure. He's craving that pecking order. He's craving that locker room etiquette. I think he misses that to some extent. Obviously, in AEW, he has a lot of leeway to do certain things, but I think with Triple H and really with what we've seen thus far for Triple H, he's willing to give the talent that leeway and that freedom to be able to go there and to be able to do those things. And I think if a guy like Punk goes back there, a guy that he knows can make money in merch, a guy that he knows can draw attention, whether, on social media, on YouTube, on TV, a pay-per-view, PLE, whatever you want to call it, this is a guy that can get the attention of the audience. And I can just tell you right now, imagine Punk going back there and working with Cody.
Punk will finish the story.
Punk could finish the story. Imagine Punk working with Roman. Imagine Punk working with Rollins. I mean, there's no shortage of interesting hot matches that he could have over there that are going to be done better, that are going to be produced better, and he won't have to deal with any of this nonsense, childish bullshit from a bunch of malcontent brats that have been emboldened by a cokehead.
100%.
Testify.
Well, Pat, the problem, I would argue that, listen, you're right on all your points. And I talked about this with Dee off the air and a few other people during the week, chats with classmates and stuff like that. But you know what?
The booking committee? Are you talking about the booking committee?
That's what we're called, the booking committee.
Quote, my peanut gallery, my peanut gallery. To quote the great Vincent K. McMahon, sometimes you have to give him the sizzle without the steak, right? Or to some effect. I mean, that's the quote. The problem with Phil Brooks is, you're right. He'll bring in merch. He'll bring in eyes again, more eyes, obviously. Not that WWE needs them, but he'll bring in other eyes. It's just sloppy at this point in his career. And someone sent me a Photoshop picture of a stare down of Roman and Punk at WrestleMania 40 in Philadelphia. And I'm sorry, I get it, but that's the best example of the sizzle is better than the steak, because if ever that match happens, Roman's going to need back surgery too. He's going to be carrying him in that match too.
I don't know, Fern. I don't know, Fern. I got to disagree, man. I got to disagree, because you look at a guy like Edge. What can Edge do that Punk can't do? You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
What can he do that he can't do? Edge is older than Punk too, on top of it all. So there's ways for them to be able to work around these things. John Cena, man. John Cena, okay. John Cena wasn't Dean Malenko, wasn't Bryan Danielson, wasn't Shawn Michaels or Bret Hart in his heyday. He wasn't. He was a great character, and he's a pretty damn good worker. But more importantly, I can't see him. But the thing with John Cena is that John Cena is able to get people invested in his character. He's able to get people invested in the story. And I think CM Punk has that ability to do that regardless of his physical limitations. Roman Reigns and him could work a great program together. The promos alone would be enough to hook people. The promos between him and Heyman, that would be fucking amazing.
No, the promos would be great. I just think that the match itself might be not what we expect. Especially, again, if it happened 5 years ago, that's one thing. Now,
I disagree. I disagree. And I'll tell you why. Because I think Punk will step up his game knowing that he's back in the big leagues. Because you know what? You could say what you want about that match between him and Samoa Joe. Was it their matches in Ring of Honor when they were younger? No, absolutely not. But the psychology was there. The heat was there. When he did the freaking belly-to-back suplex and put the hands up like John Cena, and then he did the Hulk Hogan, and he did the leg drop. Bro, and then they did the fake Hulk-up spot with him and Joe. The place went fucking nuts.
You feel that, brother?
And they can recreate that here in Roman Reigns. I believe that 1,000%. And I think with the guidance of the agents that they have available, with Michael P.S. Hayes, with Paul Heyman, CM Punk, and Roman themselves, they could come up with some really good stuff. And more importantly, to quote the GOAT, Vince McMahon, some good shit, pal.
Yowie wowie.
Yowie wowie. R.I.P. Why is Fernando giving me that look?
He's might be frozen.
Oh, no. What a look to be frozen.
He might be
I love it. I love it. Oh, man. Oh, bummer. But anyways.
There he's back. He's back. He's back, folks. Get on the fucking field.
All right. You're there, Fernando. Oh, wait. No. Are you there? Okay, there he is. He's back. He's back. Yo, you were frozen with this face, like, please. You know, it was hilarious. Like it was a really good face for you to be frozen on. But you know, I understand what you mean in terms of his physical limitations. And look, his first go around in AEW was not great. I was not a fan of it whatsoever. The matches were not good. I think he was trying to do stuff that he thought he could still do 100%. And his body would not let him do anymore. More importantly, I think he wanted to kind of go back to doing this shit that he used to do. You know? But I think if he comes back to WWE, it'll be great, Fern. And you'll watch, and we'll all watch, and we'll all be invested. And I think he could tell some great stories with a lot of the top talent that's there.
I totally agree. I think the variable, and we talked about this off the air too, contractually, it's my understanding that he was signed for a 3-year deal from July 2021 until July of next year. And having said that, not sure if in that contract language, if he has to make up the time that he missed due to injury. I don't know if that's the same in AEW. I'm not sure if Tony Khan institutes that. It is. Okay, so having said that, then I would argue that he missed 9 months. We're talking about easily into the spring of 2025. Damn. And if CM Punk is not happy and CM Punk wants to get out of there and Tony Khan doesn't want to fire him because obviously he's paying him. Again, we don't know what the language is, whether there's a non-compete. But the bottom line is, you know, Punk's not stupid. He's a businessman. If he's very unhappy, he's not going to be like, well, I want to buy out my contract because A, Tony Khan's going to want $1 for $1. And I'm sure if CM Punk is smart, he's like, well, I'll buy my contract back, 50 cents on the dollar. They're not going to agree on that. So I think Punk is stuck there until, at the minimum, looking at the calendar, the minimum April of 2025, which puts him really in a position to have to sit there, either collect a check or work something out with Khan. Khan's not going to fire him. Khan's not going to fire him.
We don't know that, though.
You're right. Well, I'll say this. Based on what's going on right now and based on the fact that if that heated exchange happened where he went up to Tony and said, hey, Tony, put down the wooden board and stop with the Adderall and Coke for a second. Listen to me. And if he did this in front of everybody, because let's be fair, if you're going to make a stink, if you're going to have a rant in front of your employer, why not do it in front of everybody instead of in a closed door meeting? I think you want to make it much more dramatic and much more impactful. Having said that, if you're CM Punk, I mean, not to say that doing that to Jack Perry was like his way of like, oh, let me see what I can do to get myself fired. I don't think it's that. But I think that there's a building tension now in that company with him. But like I said, he's going to be there until May 2025 contractually. Now, if Khan fires him or buys out the contract and says, well, listen, I'll pay 50% of it for you to go away, right? Sometimes those conversations happen. They happen in all sports. Okay, that could happen. But right now, I don't see that. I think he's stuck with Punk. Punk is stuck there. I think they're going to have to find a way to make the most of it because he still brings in money for Tony Khan. Not this week in Chicago, clearly. But for the foreseeable future, because again, they have Wrestle Dream in October, the Antonio Inoki tribute pay-per-view, and then they have Full Metal Jacket or Heavy Machinery, whatever the fuck it's called.
What are those movies?
Loaded Weapon, I think it's called.
Loaded Weapon, yeah. And I mean, we'll see, but I think, Tony Khan's in a bad position here, but it's also self-inflicted. He's also brought all these problems on himself because he's not showing leadership. He's not promoting structure. Vince would never have allowed this to happen. You can tell that Paul Levesque is not letting this happen. Now, mind you, Paul Levesque has a great network and support system of professionals and agents and producers around him. Not to say that Tony Khan doesn't. Jerry Lynn's a professional, Lee Malenko, Hugh T. Marshall. No knock on them. It's not the same support system. It's not the same structure and adult corporate behavior. It's just not. So this is the chicken's coming home to roost because you're not the CEO. You're not acting like the CEO of a company. Sorry.
I'm with you, Fern. But I do think that if he continues to be a problem and these suspensions continue to happen and he becomes more of a headache than what he's worth, I think he would release him. Now, would he put a no-compete clause or would he come up with something? Sure, he could. But I just think if this guy becomes more of an issue than what he's worth, you're going to have to do something. Whether he wants to let him go or not, I don't know. He's gonna be handcuffed ultimately. Now, do I think he wants to let him go? No, I don't, because he let Cody Rhodes walk. And look at what Cody Rhodes has done now. It's the same reason why he re-signed the Elite. Because if he let the Elite go, he knows that Triple H would have made them bigger stars than what they were in AEW, bar none.
Round them up.
And mind you, again, if he releases them, who's to say that Tony wouldn't implement a non-compete clause, which again goes into my theory of April 2025. And it just, it's, I don't know, it's a big pickle to be in if you're Tony Khan and Phil Brooks. And I don't know what's going to happen in the sense of what that company is going to go through. But speaking about competency,
just one last thing on this topic real quick. See, to me, I think this is the biggest problem with AEW. The stuff that's going on outside of the ring is more interesting than the stuff that's going on in the ring. All these backstage issues, all this nonsense, all this politics, all this he said, she said bullshit, all this stuff. This stuff is more interesting than what's going on in the ring. And that's the problem. And Tony Khan needs to figure out a way to take these issues, these backstage issues, and monetize it. If I were him, I would have just been like, okay, cool. Y'all got into this. Great. Fantastic. On the pay-per-view this weekend, it's going to be Jack Perry versus CM Punk for the Real World Championship. Bam. Right there. You got a fucking match. That crowd's going to be invested. They're going to cheer Punk on.
In a broken glass match. In a broken glass match.
In a broken glass match or a glass slipper on a pole match. I don't know. Have Cinderella come down as the special guest referee because Leatherface showed up already.
I know. Speaking of hoping for competency and structure, let's move on to another pay-per-view this weekend that's not called All Out, and that's Payback, emanating from the Igloo in one of the biggest shitholes of these United States, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Payback emanates from on the Peacock Network this Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Obviously, good card. Starting off with, again, no particular order. The Miz will have to overcome the overwhelming challenge by rising fan favorite LA Knight, who is as hot right now. You're seeing him in ads on TV for merch. Dee, I don't know if you saw my Instagram story. He's viewing my stories when I tag him. I'm blowing a load in my pants this week.
Yes.
Yes, I was ecstatic about that for sure. The Miz LA Knight, I think a good match. I think it's a good test to see about LA Knight's popularity, if it can stay hot and maybe it can grow a little bit. Working with the Miz, I think, is great. Good heel. I'd be surprised if LA Knight doesn't go over on Saturday night, where you see this rocket pack on his back. And again, the trajectory, we'll see where it goes. But right now, he's getting a pop.
Well, we know where LA Knight went
and
in his DMs.
That's it. And I think it's going to be a good match. Certainly, The Miz is great at this. The Miz is great at working with guys and elevating certain guys that, for whatever reason, at whatever time, become individuals that are, on the rise, or fans are rallying behind. And that's what they're doing with LA Knight. I know it's not for everybody. I know people are saying, you saw Wade Barrett marking out for LA Knight on Friday night. You saw him with the sunglasses. I think it's a great trend. It's a great little movement. Let's see what happens. LA Knight and Miz should be good. For the coveted undisputed tag team titles, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn.
Oh, wait. Hold on. Are we going to analyze these match by match? Because, I just want to throw in a few kind of comments here about the LA Knight match first.
Well, I'm just listing the matches.
You're running down the cards. Okay,
yeah,
fantastic.
That was just my 2 cents in the previous match. But undisputed tag team title match, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn will take on the Judgment Day combination of Damian Priest and Finn Balor in what could be maybe the conclusion of this feud. For the coveted United States Heavyweight Championship, Rey Mysterio, the Hall of Famer, will take on challenger and former champion Austin Theory. Trish Stratus, the MILF of all time, takes on another MILF. Let's be fair, another MILF in a steel cage, Becky Lynch, this Saturday night. What ultimately could be the conclusion of their feud as well. Rhea Ripley will defend the coveted Women's World Championship against Raquel Rodriguez, my Texas girl there, so I'll root for her. And in the main event for the coveted World Heavyweight Championship, Seth Rollins will defend against Shinsuke Nakamura. Good card, only 6 matches, but I'll tell you, folks, 6 matches, hell of a lot better than other cards that got 9 to 12 matches.
Some people might even say that this is an NXT show. I strongly disagree. I think and let me kind of just go in somewhat of an order here, but LA Knight Miz should be pretty good. I like the stuff that they've been doing on TV. And again, like I had mentioned before, a lot of this show, there's hot matches going on here. There's hot programs leading into it, as opposed to All In, where everything was kind of cold for the most part. But LA Knight and Miz, they've been doing great stuff on TV. I think Miz did a better LA Knight impersonation than LA Knight actually acts.
Oh yeah.
And obviously, we saw that Miz is capable of, close to Academy Award winning performances with his work in the Marine franchise. So
and the Rock impersonation
and the Rock impersonation he's been impersonating the Rock since his time on MTV when he was on The Real World. So he knows about being an Attitude Era fanboy. He knows a thing or two about it. Maybe he could teach LA Knight, but I fully expect LA Knight to go over.
Which is kind of funny, right? The pot calling the kettle black, right?
Yeah. Well, I expect some kind of promo or something. You know what I'm saying? I think if they could get a hold of that footage, I think it would be great. So obviously, they're going to do something on the Go Home SmackDown, which I expect to be pretty darn good. But you got to think LA Knight's going to go over here. He's getting more and more organic receptions from the crowd.
Yeah.
The other thing too is I want to see LA Knight have a good to great match. I haven't really seen him do that yet. And I think that once he does that, I think he's going to take a step to that next level. The guy clearly has the ability to speak. He's a decent enough worker, but I do want to see him have that great match, that signature match that he needs to kind of get him onto that next level. For the tag titles, I mean, it's interesting because you have those issues between Priest and Finn. So how is that going to play a part in this? And you also kind of feel like Sammy and Kevin might be due to lose because, I mean, they've had the belts since WrestleMania. So we could see a little something there. They haven't had that many defenses, honestly. They haven't had that many PLE defenses in that subsequent time. So I do expect it to be a great match, especially I think it's, a Pittsburgh alcoholic stepdad rules match or something like that, whatever it is.
It is a Steel City street fight in Pittsburgh.
Okay. Well, maybe one of them will get hit with the Roethlisberger or something. We don't know.
To be fair, Pat, Kevin Owens is coming back from injury. Sami Zayn's banged up. Not the worst thing to do a gimmick match per se, where you don't have to do a lot in the ring. Right. I would argue, I think that's probably the psychology behind this match.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the heels could sell a lot. The faces could get a good amount of the heat. And then when they do sell, they're going to have to sell a little bit more, which means they won't have to be bumping as much because they'll get hit with a weapon. So there's definitely ways to work around it where I think it's a little bit safer for them. Who goes over in this? I don't know. It's anybody's guess at this point because I think either team going over works. But you got to think they're going to want to milk that beef between Finn and Damian just a little bit more. And I kind of feel like maybe they're inching towards turning Damian face, especially when they got that guy, JD McDonough there as well, who Fernando's always mentioned that he's a real looker. So I think that,
yikes.
I think that match is going to be really, really good. Trish and Becky, I think it's great because we're finally getting that payoff, for that feud. And I really, really love the match on Monday. I thought it was really awesome. I love all the facial expressions, all the acting, everything else that they were doing in that match. I think it was great. They told a great story. Zoe putting Trish through the table, that, them looking at each other in the big table spot. And obviously at the end, seeing Becky get a little bit emotional about the passing of Wyndham Rotunda as well. And then telling the crowd a story about him. So I expect Becky to go over in this feud. And I gotta say, I've told you about this before. I think Trish has done a phenomenal job since she's come back. The way that she's been able to go out there, get a ton of heat, regardless of how beloved she is to the audience and really to the old school fans. She still goes out there. She gets a ton of heat. She gets a great response. I love the face mask thing. I thought that was awesome. She's working with Zoe Stark. She's making her relevant, and she's doing great stuff with Becky Lynch, who's arguably the best women's wrestler out there. We do
arguably.
Well, I think she is
really?
personally. Oh, well, that's a whole other conversation. But anyways, the U.S. title match, I don't know. If Theory gets it, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but you got to think that they're going to eventually have to end up doing him and LA Knight somewhere down the line so that LA Knight can, be that baby face to beat him. But you can also go in the direction of having Mysterio hold the US title, Dominic holding the North American title. Who's going to be the champion of the Americas? You know what I'm saying? Who's going to be the champion of North America, really, more specifically? And you could do a hair versus mask match there, and I think that would be really good stuff. So there's a lot of different ways you can go there.
Escobar. Also, the variable about Escobar. Remember, Escobar was supposed to get that title match, and
but I'm tired of Escobar. I'm tired of people turning heel on Rey, man. I feel like Escobar should be that one guy that does the right thing. Who knows? But I think that's great. Thank you, Timothy, for that one. But I think there's a million different ways they could go there with this. And this is what I like about this show. There's not a whole hell of a lot of predictable booking here. Okay. Some people might say the main event could be predictable. That remains to be seen. But this match I think could be really, really interesting. And then obviously you have the main event with Nakamura and with Rollins. And man, I got to tell you, I've been a fan of these vignettes that they've been doing with Nakamura, where he's going back to being a killer. He's working out at the dojo. He's rolling. He's doing jiu-jitsu. He's doing his striking. People forget this guy was an MMA fighter, and he's a jiu-jitsu black belt. He's a bad hombre, bad man, like Fernando's friend Stephen A. Smith would say. He's a bad man. So, he's a guy that I think they finally kind of figured out how to make him intimidating and how to make him menacing. And him cutting those promos in Japanese, talking about how he's going to break his back and Becky's going to have to help him out of bed and then he's not going to be able to walk his daughter down the aisle. I mean, this is what you need to be doing with Shinsuke Nakamura.
Correct.
However, I do think Seth is going to retain, and I would not be surprised if there's a cash-in at the end of the match. So either way, they're building up a lot of anticipation. They got a lot of hot matches. And I think that this card is going to deliver top to bottom.
I agree. I think it's going to be a great show this Saturday on Peacock. Obviously, folks, if you don't subscribe to Peacock, it's only $5.
It's $10 if you don't want commercials, or you're going to complain about it all the time.
Well, no, I'm just saying because I have to watch 27 commercials during the pay-per-view, or PLE, excuse me.
Well, if anything, for a man of your age, it's good because I know the older you get, you got to go to the bathroom more often. So you'll be able to walk to the bathroom at least a few more times, and maybe you can lay off the alcoholic beverages.
Luckily, it's only 6 matches, so it doesn't interfere with my Saturday night nightlife. So I can at least get dressed at 10:30 and go out.
You do love the nightlife, and you've got to boogie on the disco floor, whatever she says in the song. You know what
But on a side note, I mean, I think, and we talked about this off the air, Pat, that smart matchmaking for this. It's Labor Day weekend. It's Saturday. Again, college football. You're being smart with your audience. Listen, WWE is going to get their audience regardless. They're going to get their gate. The Igloo is going to be sold out, obviously. People are going to tune in on Peacock. People will buy it on DirecTV if they don't subscribe to Peacock, which at this point, why not? Why keep paying for pay-per-views per se? But the point is that it's a good compact card that makes sense. And in and out, you could be, done in 2.5 hours, at the worst 3, which doesn't really, again, college football is on. It's a holiday weekend. Doesn't really interfere with a lot of what's going on during this time of year. And again, that's a great thing about Saturday PLEs, where WWE was smart to do that. Okay, so we'll see what happens this Saturday on Payback.
Real quick thing here, Fernando. Just to talk about the LA Knight Miz match, I think they would be smart to have LA Knight come out, cut a promo, which I think he already did cut the promo. He referenced Bray Wyatt in the promo, and I thought that was cool and stuff like that. Nice little homage. But I think that if they're smart, you have LA Knight squash Miz. You have him go out there. You don't have him engage in a lot of bullshit, and you just have him squash Miz. And I think the place would go nuts if he did that. So who knows?
Absolutely. Listen, and I think to your point about the promo last week with Bray, and listen, maybe this is me just trying to elevate him more because I'm a mark for him, but smart to kind of see what he's got on a somber night when you're honoring the life of Terry Funk and Wyndham Rotunda, to have, LA Knight go out there as, not a lead guy, but a guy that, hey, you're putting up in a prime position, like, hey, listen, eyes are on you now. cut a promo that's going to get the fans even more behind you. And I think that was, to your point about, hey, promoters like to test their talent, put them in positions, let's see if they succeed or not. Let's see if they get the crowd on their side and keeps them on their side. I think that was an example. Maybe I'm overinflating the significance of it, but it seems like that was a good opportunity for Paul to say, hey, go out there, cut this promo. Let's see how the fans react. And thus far, the fans got even more behind him. Obviously, citing a quote from Wyndham Rotunda, God rest his soul, last week. But good card this Saturday. We'll see, obviously, as we're heading into the fall. Survivor Series around the corner, as they say, right? November in Chicago. A lot of good stuff going on in the world of pro wrestling. Pat, before we call it a night here, on this day, August the 30th, in pro wrestling history, on this day in 1992, coincidentally, at Wembley Stadium, in the main event, the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, the late great Davey Boy Smith, defeated Bret the Hitman Hart for the Intercontinental Championship in the main event of SummerSlam 1992. Very good card overall. I think SummerSlam 92 overall does not get the flowers it deserves. The world title match between Macho Man Randy Savage and the Ultimate Warrior, the Road Warriors against Money Incorporated, Rick Martel and Shawn Michaels, other great stuff. One of the better SummerSlams I can remember since the inception of the pay-per-view. On this day, also in August 30th of 1993, Dustin Rhodes defeated the late, great Ravishing Rick Rude in a match to win the vacant WCW United States Championship. Very significant win for Dustin Rhodes. It was his first singles title in WCW. Also on this day in 1993, coincidentally, SummerSlam emanating from Detroit, Michigan. It was the end of the in-ring career of the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase as he opened the show against the late great Scott Hall, aka Razor Ramon. It would be his last physical match in WWE due to neck issues. Obviously, we all know the rest of that great card: Shawn Michaels and Mr. Perfect, Bret the Hitman Hart getting disqualified against Jerry the King Lawler, and certainly Yokozuna retaining the WWF Championship as a result of Lex Luger winning by a countout. That obviously in 1993. Also, on this day in 1998, the 10th SummerSlam emanating from Madison Square Garden. Certainly the debut of Edge, as well as other great matches. The iconic ladder match.
The pay-per-view debut of Edge. The pay-per-view debut of Edge, because Edge did debut on Raw. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Certainly the iconic ladder match between Triple H and The Rock, and certainly, the pop, I can still hear that pop in Madison Square Garden between The Undertaker and Stone Cold's entrance into the Garden. Unbelievable. Obviously, also on this day, tragically, in 2009, icon Walter Killer Kowalski, a trainer of many, many Hall of Famers in the world of pro wrestling, passed away at the age of 81. And also on this day in pro wrestling history, in the year 2010, the 900th episode of Monday Night Raw took place, with opening of Bret the Hitman Hart talking about himself and The Undertaker being the only two people in WWE that were on this episode and the original Monday Night Raw in 1993. A match was made by the then anonymous general manager. Obviously, the match did not take place as the Nexus and Kane came out to jump The Undertaker. We all know the limitations Bret Hart had during the summer of 2010, obviously, as he made a return to the WWE. Folks, all that great stuff happened on this day, August the 30th, in pro wrestling history.
Fantastic. Action-packed. I love that SummerSlam 98 card. I remember going to house shows leading up to it. And I remember just the pop that Austin would get. Back in the day, we were still using them cameras. Not everybody had a camera phone back then, but I remember the flash bulbs lighting up the Garden. And just, it was a special time in the business, man. And Steve was just on top of the world, looking down on creation. But good to be back here again with you. And folks, if you haven't already, check out some of our old episodes. And for those of you who are Bray Wyatt / Wyndham Rotunda fans, we did have a tribute episode for him. You can check that out as well on our YouTube page and anywhere else that you like to watch these dirty videos. Just great to be back here again with you. Great to have you back, Professor. And remember, I'm the star of the show, and I'm always late. So I appreciate your kindness, guys. And hopefully,
to quote Disco Inferno in the promo, during Keep It 100, I would say you're my co-host.
No. That's subjective. And more importantly, I think there was a poll recently. I think it was a Gallup poll where people had said that I'm the host of the show and you're my co-host. Yeah, so acknowledge me, But anyways, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. We appreciate it. Sharing is caring unless it's STDs. Subscribe, tell your friends, tell your mom, tell your little brother, tell the guy down the block, tell a dog, tell anybody who'll fucking listen. We appreciate it. Keep it coming. Keep the comments coming. And a shout out to our top guy here, Timothy Brown. Timothy Brown,
baby. T Brown. My man.
Timothy Brown is the Work in the Marks top guy. Yes, that was a great match between Mr. Perfect and Bret Hart in a dark match when Mr. Perfect came back for that run again in the early 2000s.
Brock Lesnar.
And he unfortunately passed away shortly after that, though. But those guys were great friends, and they did have that showdown on the airplane on the plane ride from hell. So, but thank you so much to everybody that tunes in, and shout outs again to our top guy, Timothy Brown.
Absolutely. And folks, again, sharing is caring, as Pat said again, except STDs, wives and girlfriends collectively. Certainly make sure that you tell everybody you can about Working the Marks here on Famcast Media. Shout out to our amazing executive producer, Dee Rotten, that brings all the great content, the reels, the shorts on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter collectively. Obviously, folks, hey, we love you for tuning in every Wednesday. Listen, keep enjoying pro wrestling. It's a great time to be alive as a fan with so many options out there. But again, when it comes to your options for podcasts, we appreciate you making Working the Marks a part of your Wednesday evening. So again, thank you so much for tuning in here. Check out, again, all of our social media. Sharing is caring once again, folks. He is New Jersey's premier wrestling analyst, PVR, the Patrick Vicente Rivera, the PVR superstar.
Bro, still dropping my fucking government name. God damn it, man. Stop telling everybody my fucking government name.
Yeah. And I am New Jersey's premier award-winning journalist, and my government name is Dr. Fernando Uribe. Folks, listen, if you're watching, we're talking about it, and we're always working the marks here on Famcast Media. Folks, have a great night. We'll see you next Wednesday. And don't forget, if you can't be good, be bad, baby.
Chico.
Famcast Media.